Assumption is not a technique you perform for a few minutes a day. It is the position of consciousness you live from. Neville Goddard taught that consciousness is the only reality, and what you consistently assume to be true about yourself must externalize as fact. The lottery, money, opportunity, and chance are not separate forces deciding your fate. They are neutral mechanisms that rearrange themselves according to the state you occupy within. The moment you assume that you are a lottery winner, you step into a new identity, and that identity begins to express itself through circumstances. Most people misunderstand manifestation because they believe they are trying to get something. But creation does not respond to wanting, it responds to being. You do not attract what you desire, you express what you assume yourself to be. When you assume the state of already having one, you are no longer asking reality to give you something. You are allowing reality to confirm who you already are. This is why Neville insisted that imagining creates reality only when imagination is accepted as present fact. Think carefully about this. The world you see is not creating your inner state. Your inner state is creating the world you see. If you assume that winning the lottery is rare, difficult, or reserved for others, that assumption becomes law in your experience. But when you quietly accept, I am someone who wins, the law begins operating in your favor automatically. There is no effort involved because assumption works beneath conscious struggle. It moves through belief, expectation, and identity. Assumption becomes powerful when it feels natural. Neville described this as entering the state akin to sleep, where the rational mind loosens its grip and the feeling of reality takes over. In that space, you are not visualizing to convince yourself. You are remembering something that already belongs to you. The difference is subtle but profound. One carries tension, the other carries calm certainty. Creation responds to calm certainty. When you assume, you are not denying your current circumstances, you are recognizing them as old reflections. The outer world is always a delayed echo of past assumptions. If today's bank balance does not match your assumption, it does not matter. The law is already at work. Persisting in assumption means you refuse to emotionally react to appearances. You understand that appearances must change because consciousness has changed. This is why Neville said, dare to assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. To assume is to dare, to accept something internally before there is permission from the outside world. It requires inner authority. The lottery does not decide if you are a winner, your assumption does. Once the assumption is accepted, the bridge of events forms invisibly, step by step, until the external world has no option but to align. The moment assumption becomes your resting state, effort falls away. You no longer strain or wait anxiously. You move with quiet expectation, grounded in the knowing that what you have assumed must objectify. This is the foundation of all manifestation, and the first truth you must accept: assumption is not preparation for reality. It is reality itself, unfolding. The greatest obstacle to manifesting a lottery win is not lack of belief. It is the identity of trying. The moment you see yourself as someone attempting to win, you quietly assume that winning is not yet yours. Neville Goddard made it clear that creation is finished, and every possible state already exists. You are not moving something towards you, you are moving yourself into the state where it already is. As long as you remain in the identity of effort, you remain outside the state of fulfillment. Notice how subtle this is. When you say, I am trying to manifest, you are affirming separation. You are declaring that the thing you desire exists in the future, not in the present. The law does not respond to future tense. It responds only to what is assumed as true now. A lottery winner does not try to win. They remember the moment they checked the numbers. They recall the calm certainty that settled in. They live from the after effect, not the anticipation. This is why Neville emphasized changing self-concept above all else. You must stop identifying as the person who hopes, waits, or struggles. That version of you produces more hoping, waiting, and struggling. Instead, you adopt the inner posture of someone for whom winning is normal, not shocking, not unbelievable. Normal. When wealth feels normal internally, it becomes possible externally. The shift happens when you allow the desire to relax into acceptance. Trying is tense, being is relaxed. The nervous system itself becomes a signal to reality. When you drop effort, you communicate trust. Trust is not blind faith, it is the quiet knowing that no force outside of you is deciding the outcome. You are the operant power. When this realization sinks in, urgency dissolves. A common mistake is overdoing techniques, affirming constantly, visualizing desperately, checking signs compulsively. These behaviors come from the identity of lack. Neville warned that imagination must be free, not strained. If you feel the need to convince yourself repeatedly, it means the assumption has not yet been accepted. The solution is not more repetition, it is deeper acceptance. Ask yourself this: how would I feel if this were already done? Not excited, not frantic, settled, grounded, secure. That feeling is the doorway. Once you enter it, the law takes over. You no longer monitor the process because you are no longer outside of it. You are living from the end. When doubts arise, and they will, you do not fight them. You gently return to the identity you have chosen. You remind yourself that doubt does not cancel assumption unless you agree with it. You persist not by force, but by loyalty to your new self-concept. Neville called this persistence faithfulness to the unseen reality. The moment you stop trying, manifestation accelerates. You release resistance without effort. You stop interfering with the bridge of events. Life begins to surprise you, not because of luck, but because you finally stepped into the state where winning was inevitable. This is the paradox Neville taught. You receive not by trying to get, but by assuming you already have. The feeling of already having won is the secret Neville Goddard returned to again and again, because feeling is the language of the subconscious mind. Words may pass through awareness, but feeling impresses consciousness. When you enter the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are not pretending or fantasizing. You are selecting a state and allowing yourself to experience it as real now. This is what gives the assumption its creative power. Most people misunderstand feeling and confuse it with excitement. Excitement is unstable, it rises and falls. The feeling Neville spoke of is quiet, grounded, and deeply natural. It is the sense of, this is done. When someone has already won the lottery, they are not constantly thrilled. They are calm, certain. The nervous energy disappears, replaced by a settled confidence that does not need validation. To enter this feeling, you must withdraw attention from the outer world and place it inward. Neville taught that imagination creates reality, and imagination is always experienced subjectively. Close your eyes and allow the senses to soften. You are not forcing images. You are allowing a scene to arise that would naturally follow a lottery win. Perhaps it is checking your account, speaking to someone you trust, or feeling the relief of financial freedom. Keep it simple. The simpler the scene, the more believable it becomes. What matters is not the clarity of the image, but the reality of the feeling it produces. When the scene feels real, even briefly, you have touched the state. That moment is enough. The subconscious does not measure time. It responds to acceptance. If, for a few seconds, the feeling of winning feels natural, the assumption has been planted. Neville often emphasized doing this in a relaxed, drowsy state because the conscious mind interferes less. In that state, the boundary between imagination and reality thins. You are not convincing yourself. You are allowing yourself to experience what already exists in potential. The law responds immediately to this acceptance, even if the outer world takes time to reorganize. Once the feeling is entered, your role is not to repeat it endlessly, but to honor it. Throughout the day, you carry yourself differently. You make decisions from a place of security. You respond to life with more ease. These subtle shifts are signs that the feeling has impressed itself upon you. You do not force them, they emerge naturally. If the feeling fades, do not panic. Feeling is not meant to be held constantly. Neville taught persistence, not pressure. You simply return to the feeling whenever you notice yourself slipping into doubt or lack. Each return deepens the assumption, making it more familiar and stable. The outer world may continue to show contrast for a time, but this is irrelevant. Feeling is cause, circumstances are effect. When you understand this, you stop reacting emotionally to appearances. You know they are echoes of old states. The new state is already active within you. Eventually, the feeling of having won becomes your default. It no longer feels imagined, it feels remembered. At that point, manifestation is no longer something you are doing. it is something unfolding. The feeling has done its work, and reality must now follow the pattern impressed upon consciousness. Releasing the need to control how the lottery win happens is one of the most decisive shifts you can make. Neville Goddard was unequivocal on this point. Once you assume the end, the means are none of your concern. The human mind wants to calculate, predict, and plan, but these impulses arise from fear and doubt, not faith. The law of assumption operates beyond logic, and when you attempt to manage the process, you quietly confess that you do not trust the law to work without your supervision. Trying to figure out how the win will come places your attention back on limitation. You begin to analyze odds, timing, ticket choices, and external conditions. This returns you to the state of trying, where the mind believes reality must be forced or negotiated. Neville taught that manifestation is effortless once the assumption is accepted. Effort enters only when you leave the end and return to the middle. When you assume the feeling of having already won, the path to its fulfillment forms automatically. Neville called this the bridge of incidents, a sequence of seemingly natural events that lead to the physical realization of your assumption. You are not meant to see the entire bridge in advance. In fact, if you could, the process would lose its power. The bridge unfolds step by step, often in ways that appear ordinary, until the final outcome reveals their purpose. Control is a form of resistance. It implies that something might go wrong if you do not interfere. Trust, on the other hand, signals acceptance. When you drop the how, you tell the subconscious mind that the assumption is complete. There is nothing left to fix. This allows the law to operate cleanly, without contradiction. Neville emphasized that imagination sets the destination, not the route. The moment you begin questioning how it will happen, you are no longer dwelling in the end. You are mentally stepping back into the present conditions and judging them. This splits your consciousness and weakens the assumption. To manifest effectively, consciousness must be unified. The end must feel final. This does not mean passivity. It means alignment. You still act, but your actions feel natural, not forced. You may feel inspired to buy a ticket, check results, or follow a certain impulse, but these actions arise without anxiety. They feel ordinary. Neville stressed that inspired action flows from assumption. It does not create assumption. When the end is accepted, the right actions occur effortlessly. Letting go of the how also frees you from disappointment. If you expect the win to come in a specific way or at a specific time, you create unnecessary resistance. The law does not fail. Expectations do. When you release all conditions, you allow reality to surprise you. This openness accelerates manifestation because there is no mental argument blocking the process. The deeper truth Neville revealed is that you do not manifest events. You manifest states. Once the state of lottery winner is assumed, the events are secondary. They must follow because states express themselves. You do not need to supervise this expression any more than you supervise your heartbeat. Dropping the how is an act of inner maturity. It is the recognition that you are not the door at the level of events, but the chooser at the level of consciousness. When you rest in that knowing, tension dissolves. You stop waiting, stop watching, and stop measuring progress. And in that stillness, the bridge of incidents completes itself, quietly delivering the reality that was already accepted within. Persistence, as Neville Goddard described it, has nothing to do with repeating techniques mechanically or forcing belief through effort. True persistence is loyalty to a state of consciousness. It is remaining faithful to the identity you have chosen, regardless of what the outer world temporarily displays. Many people misunderstand this and exhaust themselves affirming, visualizing, or scripting endlessly, believing that more action will produce faster results. In reality, this behavior often signals inner doubt rather than faith. When Neville spoke of persistence, he meant persisting in the assumption that the desire is already fulfilled. This is an inner posture, not a ritual. Once you have accepted the state of being a lottery winner, your task is not to keep proving it to yourself, but to stop abandoning it. Each time you react emotionally to lack, delay, or contradiction, you momentarily step out of the assumed state. Persistence simply means stepping back in. Techniques are only tools to help you enter a state. They are not the power themselves. Neville warned that imagination must be used lovingly and confidently, not compulsively. If you feel anxious when you stop affirming, it means you are using the technique as reassurance rather than confirmation. The moment the assumption is accepted, reassurance is no longer needed. You know, even if nothing outside has changed yet, a lottery winner does not wake up every day repeating, I won, I won, I won, out of fear that it might disappear. They live their life differently. Their decisions change. Their emotional baseline shifts. They carry a quiet confidence that does not require repetition. This is the model you follow. You persist not by doing more, but by being consistent in who you are internally. Doubt will arise, and this does not mean failure. Neville made it clear that doubt only has power when you agree with it. When a doubtful thought appears, you do not wrestle with it or suppress it. You simply return to the feeling and identity you have chosen. You remind yourself gently, that is not who I am anymore. This calm redirection is persistence in its purest form. One of the greatest signs that persistence is working is emotional neutrality toward the desire. When you stop obsessing over outcomes and timelines, it indicates that the assumption has stabilized. You are no longer trying to get something, you are allowing something to unfold. This neutrality is not indifference, it is trust. Neville taught that the subconscious mind accepts what you return to most often, not what you do most intensely. A single moment of true acceptance outweighs hours of strained effort. Each time you enter the state of fulfillment, you deepen its roots. Over time, the new state becomes familiar, and the old state of lack loses its grip. As persistence strengthens, you notice subtle changes. You feel less reactive, you speak differently, you carry yourself with ease. These are not signs that the manifestation is coming, they are signs that it is already active. The outer world must follow because it always mirrors the dominant state within. Persisting in the state, rather than the technique, is the difference between forcing reality and allowing it. Neville's teaching was simple but profound. Remain faithful to the unseen reality until it hardens into fact. When you do this, manifestation becomes inevitable, not because you worked harder, but because you stayed true to who you decided to be. Detachment from time and outcome is the final refinement of assumption, and it is where most people unknowingly interfere with their own manifestation. Neville Goddard taught that impatience is not neutral. It is an assumption in disguise. When you constantly ask, when will it happen? You are assuming that it has not happened. Time pressure reveals that the state of fulfillment has not yet been fully accepted. True assumption feels complete now, not pending. Time exists only for the conscious mind. The subconscious mind, which executes the assumption, does not operate on clocks or calendars. It responds only to acceptance. The moment you accept something as done, the process begins, regardless of what the calendar says. When you detach from time, you signal that there is no urgency, no fear, and no doubt. This inner calm is not passive, it is powerful. Outcome pressure is another form of control. It appears as emotional monitoring, checking for signs, scanning reality for movement, interpreting delays as failure. Neville warned that this behavior pulls you out of the end and back into observation mode. When you observe too closely, you identify with the present circumstances instead of the assumed reality. Detachment means you stop using the outer world as evidence and allow it to catch up in its own way. A person who has truly assumed a lottery win does not live in suspense. They are relaxed. They go about their day with an underlying sense of security. They are not waiting for permission to feel at ease. That ease is the proof of assumption. Neville emphasized that feeling naturalness is the sign that the subconscious has accepted the idea. When something feels natural, it no longer needs attention. Letting go of outcome pressure does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop needing reassurance. You trust the law because you have tested it internally. This trust is quiet. It does not announce itself. It simply rests. The less you interfere, the faster reality reorganizes because there is no conflicting signal being sent. Detachment also protects you from emotional swings. When you are no longer measuring progress, you are no longer disappointed by appearances. Neville taught that circumstances have no creative power. They are shadows. When you understand this, you stop reacting emotionally to them. Reaction feeds the old state. Non-reaction starves it. As detachment deepens, you may notice that thoughts of the lottery arise less frequently. This is not a sign of forgetting your desire, it is a sign of fulfillment. Desires obsess us only when they feel incomplete. When the assumption is secure, the desire relaxes. This is one of the clearest indicators that manifestation is underway. Eventually, detachment becomes effortless. You are no longer manifesting. You are simply living from a state of knowing. Life feels lighter, you are present. You are not waiting for the future to validate you. This inner independence is the mark of mastery Neville pointed toward. When the manifestation arrives, it often feels almost ordinary, even though the result is extraordinary. This is because consciousness accepted it long before the world displayed it. Detachment allowed the law to work without resistance. Time lost its grip, pressure dissolved, and reality, having no alternative, conformed to the state that was assumed and calmly sustained.